My wife cheated with my best friend, then secretly transferred $300 into her sister's account to hide assets before our divorce, only for me to discover she's been lying about everything, including the house we jointly own worth $850. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife turned out to be the biggest liar and cheat I've ever known. Honestly, I thought we had a good thing going, married for 8 years, 2 kids, a nice house in the suburbs, and enough money to keep us comfortable. But then, out of nowhere, everything exploded. It all started with little things, missing money here, strange texts there, nothing that raised alarms at first. I figured maybe she was just stressed or maybe spending a little more than usual. But then I noticed her phone was more guarded than Fort, and she started coming home late more often, always with that fake smile she put on when she knew she was hiding something. It was a Tuesday evening when I decided to do a little digging. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through our joint bank account, and I saw it, an irregular transfer of $300. My stomach sank. I stared at the screen, blinking hard, trying to process what I was seeing. It was transferred to her sister Lisa's account. I knew Lisa wasn't exactly rolling in cash. She was a single mom working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Why would my wife transfer that kind of money there? I couldn't understand it. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots, but I felt like I was in a fog. I started digging into our finances more carefully. That's when I noticed a pattern. More odd transfers, some under different names, and a lot of cash withdrawals I hadn't approved. It was like she was secretly funneling money out of our accounts, hiding assets in ways I never imagined possible. That's when I realized she'd been lying about everything. About the house, about her savings, even about her job. She'd been telling me she was working late, that she had client meetings, but I found out she'd been sleeping with her best friend, Mark. That bastard. I caught them in a hotel last weekend. I saw them through the window, her in his arms, her lips on his neck, and I swear, my blood turned ice cold. I confronted her that night. I was furious, but I also felt betrayed on a level I can't even describe. I told her I knew about Mark, about the money, about all of it. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk and started spinning her lies. She said Mark was just a friend, that she was only with him because I was too busy with work, that she needed someone to talk to, someone who understood her. Yeah, right. Like I didn't see her sneaking out at night, like I didn't see her texting him in secret. She kept denying everything, even as the evidence piled up. She went as far as to say I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that she loved me and only me. But I knew better. I saw the texts, the photos, the bank statements. She'd been lying to my face for months. The emotional hit me hard. I was angry, then devastated, then numb. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this after everything we'd built? I felt sick, like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could think about was how she'd been lying about the house, the money, about everything. She told me she was saving for the kids' college, for our future, but I found out she'd been secretly transferring cash into her sister's account to hide assets, probably planning to leave me with nothing. The thought of her lying so blatantly, of her sneaking around behind my back, made my blood boil. I wanted to smash something. I wanted to make her pay for the pain she'd caused me. But at the same time, I started thinking about what I was going to do next. I knew I couldn't stay with her, not after all this. Not after she'd betrayed me and our family so completely. I needed to protect myself and my kids. The house, the money, everything I'd worked for, she'd been lying about it all. I realized I had to act fast before she drained everything, before she took off with her sister's help, leaving me with nothing. That's when I started planning my revenge, but I'll tell you more about that in the next part. After I found out about the transfers and her affair, everything changed in an instant. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. The house, the money, the years we spent building a life together, it was all a lie, had been playing me from the start, and her lies went deeper than I ever imagined. I knew I couldn't confront her again without some sort of plan. She was the kind of woman who could spin any story, lie her way out of anything, and manipulate people like a pro. I had to be smarter. The first thing I did was get access to our joint bank statements and the online accounts. I needed to know exactly what she'd been up to. I tracked the transfers, traced the money to different accounts, and found out that she'd transferred $300, $0 into her sister Lisa's account. That was a huge red flag. Why hide that much money? I knew she was planning to hide assets before we filed for divorce. It made sense now why she was so secretive about the house. She'd been lying about its value, claiming it was worth less than it actually was. Turns out, the house is worth around $850, $0, and she'd been hiding that from me too. I also discovered she'd been lying about her job. She told me she was working as a freelance designer, but I found out she hadn't taken on a single project in months. Instead, she'd been funneling money out of our accounts, paying off her friends and buying herself expensive jewelry and designer clothes. The woman had a whole secret life, and I was just now starting to see it. I knew I had to get proof, solid proof, to confront her properly and protect my assets. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. I downloaded her text messages, emails, and bank statements. I even hired a private investigator to follow her for a few days. Turns out, she'd been meeting Mark at hotels, going on trips with him and lying to everyone, including her own family, about her whereabouts. I couldn't believe how deep the lies went. She'd been telling her sister she was saving for the future, but the truth was she was secretly transferring money out of our account, planning her escape. The most shocking part was discovering that had been lying about the house all along. She told me she wanted to sell it to buy a smaller place because she didn't want to be tied down, but I found out she'd been secretly refinancing it and pulling out equity, money she'd been hiding from me. I felt like my entire life had been a lie. The woman I'd married, the partner I trusted, she'd been scheming behind my back from the start. I was angry, but I also felt betrayed on a level I couldn't even put into words. That's when I decided I had to confront her. I set up a meeting at our house, told her I had enough evidence to prove everything, and demanded she come clean. She tried to deny everything at first, acting innocent, acting like I was just paranoid. She said I was overreacting, that I was jealous and insecure, but I wasn't having any of it. I threw the bank statements and proof on the table and watched her face drain of color. Her usual bitchy smirk was replaced with panic. Her reaction was classic. She tried to turn it around, saying I was crazy, that I was accusing her without cause. She said she'd been under so much stress, that Mark was just a friend, that the money she transferred was for her sister's emergency, that she loved me and only me. But I knew she was lying. I could see the deception in her eyes. It was clear she was panicked, trying to save herself, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd seen enough. That confrontation was the tipping point. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, and I definitely couldn't stay married to someone who'd lied so thoroughly. I felt a mix of relief and heartbreak. This wasn't the life I wanted, living with a woman who had no integrity, who was willing to cheat, lie, and steal from her own family just to cover her tracks. I knew I had to get out, and I knew I had to do it fast before she managed to drain the rest of our money or hide away even more assets. I started planning my next move, getting a lawyer, figuring out how to protect what was mine, and preparing for the inevitable divorce. But I also knew I'd need to deal with the fallout, especially her bitchy attitude and the way she'd try to manipulate everything. I was ready for that fight. I just didn't know how deep her lies went or how much damage she'd already caused. The worst part is I still felt love for her even after all this. But love doesn't fix lies, and it sure as hell doesn't undo betrayal. I was done being the fool in this story. After I gathered enough evidence and confronted, I realized that the game was only just beginning. Her reaction, denial, deflection, that typical bitchy smirk, only confirmed what I already knew deep down. She'd been lying to me for months, maybe even years, and now she was desperate to keep her secrets buried. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, and I had to act fast to protect what was left of my life and assets. I contacted a lawyer the very next morning. That was the hardest part, admitting to myself that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. But I also knew I had to be smart. I didn't want her to get away with hiding the house, the money, or anything else. The lawyer told me to freeze all accounts, which I did immediately. I also hired a forensic accountant to go through every transaction, every transfer, and every withdrawal she'd made. I wanted a clear picture of what she'd been up to, and I wasn't going to let her hide anything from me. Meanwhile, I kept a close eye on her movements. She started acting even more bitchy and paranoid, probably realizing I was onto her. She would snap at the kids, yell at the dog, and make passive-aggressive comments about how unfair everything was. That woman was good at playing the victim, blaming everyone but herself. I could see her trying to spin stories to her family, telling them I was just paranoid, that I was accusing her for no reason. But I had proof, and I wasn't backing down. One night she came home late again, smelling of perfume I didn't recognize, her phone constantly buzzing. I decided to confront her directly. I asked her what she was hiding, and she snapped back, saying I was crazy, that she was just out with friends, that I was paranoid because I didn't trust her. Her voice was sharp, bitchy, almost like she enjoyed throwing me off balance. I told her I knew about the transfers, the affair, everything. That's when she finally started to crack. She admitted the affair with Mark, but she insisted it was just sex, that she was confused, and that she loved me but needed something else. Yeah, right. That was her way of trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. The anger inside me was boiling over. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. How could she cheat on me with my best friend? How could she steal from us, lie about the house, and then have the nerve to accuse me of not trusting her? But beneath all that rage, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to get out, and I had to do it without letting her spin her web any further. I decided I'd move out of the house, file for divorce, and fight for what's mine. The next few days were a whirlwind. I packed a bag, moved into a hotel, and made arrangements for the divorce. I also started documenting everything: her lies, her manipulations, her secret transactions. I wanted to make sure I had everything on record. I also reached out to her sister Lisa, who was unwittingly involved in her schemes. I told Lisa I knew about her sister's lies and that I'd be taking legal action to recover the money. Lisa seemed surprised but didn't deny anything outright. I could tell she was caught in the middle, but I didn't care. My focus was on protecting my kids and my assets. Meanwhile was getting more aggressive. She kept calling, texting, trying to guilt-trip me into staying. She'd say things like, "You're ruining our family," or "You're overreacting," but I wasn't going to fall for her BS anymore. I saw her for what she truly was: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd lied her way into my life and now wanted to keep me trapped in her web of deception. In the middle of all this chaos, I realized something important. I'd been so focused on her lies and the betrayal that I almost forgot about myself. I'd let her control so much of my life, but now I was reclaiming it. I didn't want to be the victim anymore. I wanted to be the one in control. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be legal battles, emotional fallout, and probably some nasty fights. But I was done playing the fool. I was done being her pawn. This was about justice, about protecting my kids, and about finally ending the nightmare she'd created. Looking back now, I see how deep her lies went and how much she'd twisted everything. But I also learned a lot about myself, about my strength, my resolve, and my ability to stand up after being betrayed so thoroughly. I don't regret exposing her. If anything, I feel relieved that I finally see her for what she really is. The biggest lesson: never ignore the small signs of lies and betrayal. Because when they add up, they can destroy everything you thought was real. And trust me, I'll never let anyone do that to me again. Once I had the legal groundwork laid, accounts frozen, evidence in hand, and a clear plan to divorce, I knew I had to confront her one last time. I wasn't going to let her spin any more lies or manipulate the situation. I set up a meeting at the house, telling her I wanted to talk face to face, just us. I wanted her to see that I wasn't backing down, that I was serious about ending this charade. Honestly, I was nervous but mostly angry. I wanted her to know I had everything on her, every secret, every lie, every stolen dollar. She greeted me at the door with her usual bitchy smirk, trying to act like she was the victim. She said she didn't understand what I was so upset about, that everything was just a misunderstanding. I laid out the evidence on the table: bank statements, the transfers, her texts with Mark, even her secret plans to refinance the house. Her face started to drain of color, and her bitchy attitude faded into panic. She tried to deny everything, but I cut her off. I told her I knew she'd been lying from the start, that I had the proof, and that I was done playing her game. That's when she started to get angry. She accused me of spying, of invading her privacy, of trying to ruin her life. She yelled, "You're overreacting. You don't know what you're talking about. I love you, and I'd never do anything to hurt this family." Yeah, right. I'd heard enough lies. I told her she'd been caught red-handed, that her manipulations and lies had gone too far, and that I was filing for divorce. I also told her I'd be fighting for full custody of the kids because I didn't want them to grow up thinking it was okay to lie, cheat, and steal. Her reaction: she lost her temper. She screamed, calling me controlling, paranoid, and jealous. She said I was the reason everything was falling apart, that I was a bad husband, a bad father, and that I didn't deserve her love. She threw things, slammed doors, and finally collapsed into tears, fake tears, I'm sure. She tried to guilt me into staying, saying she'd change, that she'd stop lying, that she'd be a better wife. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her act. I knew she'd only continue her manipulations if I let her. The truth was, I didn't want her to change. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to be her victim anymore. I told her she had two choices: come clean, hand over everything she'd hidden and accept the divorce, or keep lying and lose everything. She looked at me with that bitchy glare, then finally admitted she'd been planning to leave, that she'd been secretly transferring money to her sister, and that she'd been sleeping with Mark because she felt trapped. I could see her trying to justify it all, but I was done listening. That confrontation was a turning point. I realized I'd been a fool to stay so long, to ignore all the warning signs. Now I was finally taking control. I told her I'd be calling the lawyer the next day, that I was filing for divorce, and that I would fight for custody and the house. She kept trying to manipulate me, crying, pleading, even threatening to ruin me. But I stood firm. I knew she was just trying to save herself, that her bitchy attitude was her way of deflecting responsibility. But I'd had enough of her lies. In the aftermath of that night, I moved out for good. I rented a small place nearby so I could keep an eye on everything. I wanted to keep the house, the assets, everything I'd worked so hard for. I also started the process of dividing things legally. The house, worth around $850, $0, was a huge part of the fight, but I was determined to get my fair share. I knew she'd try to claim it was worth less or that she deserved more because she'd suffered, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate the system. The kids, I made arrangements to keep their lives as normal as possible. I didn't want them to grow up thinking lying and cheating are okay. I wanted them to see that honesty and integrity matter, something I'd learned the hard way. And she kept trying to call, text, and guilt-trip me into saving the marriage. But I knew better now. She'd betrayed me on every level, emotionally, financially, morally. The only thing I could do was move forward and protect what was mine. Looking back, I realize how much I was blinded by love, by the idea of our perfect life. But that wasn't real. It was all a facade. And I'm glad I finally saw her for what she truly is: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd lie, cheat, and steal her way through life if she could get away with it. The biggest lesson I've learned: never ignore the signs of betrayal, no matter how much you love someone. Because if you do, you might end up losing everything, including yourself. After I moved out and started the legal process, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief because I finally saw the truth clearly, and anger because I'd been blind for so long. Manipulations had cost me my trust, my peace of mind, and potentially a lot of my future. But I was determined not to let her win. I had to protect what was left: my kids, my money, my sanity. The fight for the house, the assets, and custody was brutal. She tried every trick in the book, playing the victim, throwing tantrums, even lying to the lawyers to sway the judge. But I had the evidence, and I stayed firm. The house was a big issue. It's worth around $850, $0, and I knew she'd claim she deserved it all because she suffered through the marriage. But I had documentation proving she'd been secretly refinancing it, pulling out equity, and hiding the true value from me. I also had proof she'd transferred hundreds of thousands into her sister Lisa's account, trying to hide assets. It was a mess, but I was prepared. I worked with my lawyer to file for full custody, arguing that her lies and manipulations showed she was unfit to care for the kids. Meanwhile, kept trying to manipulate the situation. She would call the kids, trying to guilt-trip them into pleasing her, or send me passive-aggressive texts about how unfair everything was. I just blocked her number most of the time. I didn't want her to continue poisoning my kids with her bitchy attitude. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to take the kids or hide more assets. It was uncomfortable, but I needed to be sure she wasn't planning anything else. One day she showed up at my new place, crying and begging me to forgive her. She said she was sorry, that she loved me, and that she'd changed. I looked her right in the eyes and told her I didn't believe her, that her lies and betrayals had broken whatever trust we had left. I told her if she really wanted to make amends, she'd have to come clean, give up her manipulative ways, and accept the consequences. She scoffed, called me heartless, and stormed off. But deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. I couldn't go back to someone who'd lied so thoroughly. The legal battles went on for months. She tried to delay everything, claiming she needed more time to think, but I pushed forward. I had the evidence, her bank statements, her texts with Mark, her secret transfers, and I used them to show the judge that she was hiding assets and unfit to have primary custody. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I refused to back down. I wanted my life back, and I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. Eventually, the judge awarded me full custody of the kids, ordered her to pay back the stolen money, and awarded me the house. It wasn't easy, and I had to fight every step of the way, but I came out of it stronger. I learned that sometimes the biggest act of self-love is walking away from someone who's been dishonest and manipulative. I also learned that money isn't everything. Trust, honesty, and integrity matter far more. And most important, I realized I can survive betrayal, that I am capable of rebuilding my life even after someone I loved turned out to be so selfish and deceitful. Now, I'm in a better place. The house is mine, the kids are safe, and I'm slowly healing. But I'll never forget what happened. I'll always remember that even the most perfect-looking life can hide a lot of darkness behind closed doors. And I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar knows. Don't ignore the warning signs. Protect yourself, stand your ground, and never let anyone manipulate you into believing their lies. Because if you do, you might end up losing everything, just like I almost did. Looking back now, I realize how much I underestimated the depth of her betrayal. Was a master manipulator. She knew exactly how to spin her lies, how to play the victim, and how to make me doubt myself just enough to keep her in control. For months, I was caught in a web of deception, trying to hold onto a life that was already slipping away. The worst part was feeling so powerless, like I was just a pawn in her game, while she pulled all the strings behind my back. But the thing is, I learned a hard lesson about trust. Never assume someone is honest just because they smile or act like they care. People can hide a lot behind a pretty face, especially when greed and selfishness are involved. I also learned that you can't change someone who refuses to face their own faults. No amount of love, patience, or understanding can fix a person who's determined to lie and manipulate their way through life. The process of rebuilding has been tough. I lost a lot: time, money, a sense of security. But I gained clarity. I now see what's truly important: honesty, integrity, and peace of mind. I've become more cautious, more aware of the warning signs, and more committed to protecting myself and my kids from anyone who might try to do us harm. Most of all, I've learned that revenge isn't about getting even or punishing her. It's about making sure she can't hurt me anymore, by taking away her power, her lies, and her ability to manipulate. The justice I fought for wasn't just legal. It was emotional, mental, and financial. and I finally feel like I've reclaimed my life. To anyone who might be going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the small signs of betrayal because, in the end, they add up. Protect your assets, your children, and your sanity. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, even if it means ending a relationship that once seemed perfect. Because no amount of love is worth losing yourself over lies and betrayal. What I want to say is this: you're stronger than you think. No matter how much someone manipulates you or how deep the lies run, you have the power to walk away and rebuild. It won't be easy and it will hurt. There's no denying that. But in the end, living with betrayal is worse than facing the truth. And trust me, you can survive it. You just have to be brave enough to face the reality and take the first step toward reclaiming your life.